They say that secrets are the currency of a marriage. My husband Robert always claimed our account was transparent. Every dollar, every decision shared. For 15 years, I believed him. We built a beautiful, stable life in the suburbs of Chicago. Two high school sweethearts who had finally found their rhythm, their success, their peace. He was a partner at a successful engineering firm. I managed the local art gallery. We had no children of our own, which we always agreed gave us a beautiful, quiet freedom. Robert was meticulous, honest, and utterly dependable. He was my rock, solid and unchanging. But a rock can sometimes hide a fault line. The first crack appeared not with a whisper, but with a piece of paper. I handle all the domestic finances, the bills, the taxes. I know the rhythm of our cash flow down to the penny. 6 months ago, while reviewing the quarterly bank statements, I found an anomaly, a recurring quarterly wire transfer labeled simply as consulting fee. The amount was substantial, $5,000 every 3 months, and it was routed from Robert's personal checking account, one he kept separate for business expenses, but which I routinely monitored. I'd never seen this consulting fee before. It had no invoice number, no company name, just the routing number and the recipient's name, Ethan Hayes. I remember the exact moment. I was sitting at the kitchen island, a beam of afternoon sun cutting across the quartz countertop. The coffee was still warm. Everything felt perfect. But that name, Ethan Hayes, introduced a terrible, sharp discord into the harmony of our lives. I didn't confront Robert immediately. Confrontation, I'd learned from my mother, only grants the liar time to prepare. I became an investigator. I ran the recipient's name and account number through every open-source database I could access. Ethan Hayes. No business registered, no website, no online presence. The account was routed through a small private bank in rural Indiana, a bank Robert had absolutely no professional connection to. I waited 2 weeks, watching Robert carefully. He was normal. Too normal. He kissed me goodbye, worked late, and complained about his boss, the perfect, transparent husband. I finally asked him about it one evening as we sat watching a documentary. I used a calm, conversational tone. "Honey, I saw a strange recurring fee on your expense account." Consulting fee. $5,000 to an Ethan Hayes in Indiana. What's that about? A new client? Robert's reaction was immediate and terrifying. He didn't just flinch, he froze. The color drained from his face, and his eyes, usually warm and steady, became cold, hard slivers of panic. "It's confidential," he stammered, pulling the remote control to increase the volume of the documentary. "It's a long-standing private arrangement with a former business contact. A non-disclosure agreement is involved. It's not your concern, Sarah. It's handled. If it's a business contact, why is it routed through a private account in Indiana?" I pressed gently, my voice still level. He slammed the remote control down on the sofa arm. "I said it's handled, Sarah. Do not pry. This is my money, my business, and you need to respect the confidentiality. End of discussion." It was the first time in 15 years he had ever used that tone with me. Sharp, defensive, and final. It wasn't the voice of a man protecting business. It was the voice of a man protecting a monumental, crippling lie. His panic was my confirmation. I waited until he was asleep, his breathing deep and even beside me. I slipped out of bed, grabbed his wallet, and found an old folded business card he rarely used. I slipped it into a portable scanner I kept in my art studio and ran a background check using his full name and the address on the card. The results came back late that night. They were devastating. Robert had been married before, briefly 25 years ago, before we even met. A short, painful marriage that ended in a quick, quiet divorce. The divorce papers mentioned no children, but the background check brought up something else. A legal complaint filed 25 years ago in Indiana, a paternity suit. The mother's name was Elizabeth Hayes. The father's name was Robert. The child's name was Ethan Hayes. The truth crashed down on me, heavy and suffocating. The consulting fee wasn't business. It was a quarter-century of silent, secret child support for a son he had abandoned and hidden. My husband, the honest man, the bedrock of my stability, was living a lie, funding a secret life and concealing a fundamental part of his past that threatened to demolish the beautiful, quiet freedom we had built together. The money wasn't the crime. The silence was. The realization was a corrosive acid, eating away at every memory we shared. The consulting fee was child support. Ethan Hayes was Robert's first son, abandoned a quarter of a century ago, and I, the current wife, was living the beautiful lie built on his silent exile. I maintained the facade with Robert. I apologized for prying and promised to respect his confidential business. He relaxed instantly, relieved that his secret had been successfully defended. He didn't realize that his defense had confirmed my worst fears and that the investigation had just begun. My priority shifted from simple knowledge to forensic reconstruction. I needed to know who Ethan Hayes was today and why Robert was hiding him so fiercely. I used my knowledge of Robert's financial history to dig deeper. The $5,000 quarterly payment was always delivered punctually, but I noticed something disturbing. The amount had remained the same for 2 decades, never adjusting for inflation, college tuition, or cost of living increases. It was the bare minimum legal obligation, paid with the calculated coldness of a man fulfilling a debt, not supporting a child. I found the address associated with the Indiana bank account. It was a small, rural town, the kind of place Robert, the successful engineer, wouldn't go near. Using public records and satellite imagery, I found Ethan Hayes. He wasn't a success story, he was a statistic. He lived in a dilapidated mobile home park, working minimum wage jobs. The photos I managed to uncover showed a young man with Robert's exact jawline and eyes, but eyes that were weary, defeated, and haunted by the poverty Robert's abandonment had inflicted. Ethan Hayes was the physical manifestation of Robert's greatest lie. The deeper I dug, the more insidious Robert's financial management appeared. I found a complex web of legal trusts and insurance policies designed to shield his primary assets, our house, his investment portfolio, from any potential legal claim by Ethan. Robert wasn't just paying support, he was actively preparing for a future legal war against his own son. He was a meticulous man. He had built a financial fortress against the ghost of his past. The paranoia was justified. I discovered that Ethan Hayes had recently tried to contact Robert. Ethan's mother, Elizabeth, had passed away a year ago, leaving Ethan with nothing but debt and the sudden, crushing need to find his biological father. Robert had ignored every letter, every attempted phone call, treating his son's distress as a legal nuisance. The final piece of the puzzle came from Robert's old engineering firm's database, which I accessed using his forgotten corporate credentials. I found an old encrypted internal memo from 25 years ago. It wasn't about Ethan. It was about Robert's career trajectory. Robert hadn't been an ordinary engineer. He was involved in a disastrous multi-million-dollar project failure, a failure he had successfully pinned on a junior colleague. Robert avoided the lawsuit and the firing, but the memo indicated that his rapid departure from that city and his subsequent move to Chicago were, in fact, a professionally motivated escape. I realized the full scope of the deception. Robert didn't just abandon a son, he built our perfect life on two separate betrayals, one financial, one familial. The son was a loose end that could expose not just his past marriage, but his professional dishonesty. I also discovered a terrifying new anomaly in our finances. Over the past 3 months, Robert had secretly begun liquidating a portion of our long-term joint investment accounts. Not large amounts, but steady, substantial withdrawals. He was converting joint assets into private, untraceable cash. When I confronted him about the liquidations, his panic was no longer defensive. It was aggressive. "The market is volatile, Sarah," he barked, his eyes darting. "I'm diversifying. I'm taking the cash out of the system. I told you my business is my concern. Our joint investment is my concern, Robert," I insisted, my voice cold. "I manage the finances. I need an explanation." He exploded. He didn't yell about money. He yelled about control. "You are interfering, Sarah. You don't have children. You don't understand the pressures I'm under. Just leave it alone, or I swear to God I will handle the separation myself." The threat was clear. He wasn't just hiding a son. He was actively preparing to divorce me and steal the remaining assets before his secret could be exposed. He was planning to discard me just as cleanly and ruthlessly as he had discarded Ethan and the messy failure of his first life. My own survival instinct kicked in, sharp and freezing. I wasn't fighting for a marriage built on a lie. I was fighting for my financial future against a man who was already planning to loot it. I had to move faster, colder, and more decisively than the man who had abandoned his own blood. The realization that Robert was actively planning to divorce me and liquidate our assets was the catalyst I needed. I wasn't just Sarah, the betrayed wife. I was a financial combatant fighting for my future against a skilled, ruthless opponent, my husband. I knew his strategy, a quick, clean, legal exit, leaving me with the minimum possible settlement while his liquid assets disappeared into offshore accounts. I had to dismantle his financial fortress before he could pull the final trigger. Robert's primary weakness was his paranoia about the past. All his assets were structured to shield them from Ethan's legal claims, not from mine. I used my deep familiarity with his meticulous paperwork. I located an old, almost forgotten joint investment account, a legacy trust established early in our marriage, which held a significant amount of his personal stock portfolio. He had neglected to shield it fully because, according to the original terms he wrote, the account was irrevocable and could only be transferred to a biological heir upon his death. He thought he was protecting it from me and for himself. He never imagined I would know about Ethan. I immediately contacted a specialized divorce attorney, a sharp, discreet woman named Helen. I didn't tell her the full truth, just that my husband was exhibiting clear signs of financial instability, preparing to file for separation, and liquidating joint assets. I presented the evidence of the quarterly $5,000 consulting fee as proof of his hidden liabilities and ongoing financial deception. Helen's strategy was swift. A preemptive strike. We filed for an immediate temporary injunction to freeze all joint accounts, citing Robert's erratic behavior and the proven existence of undisclosed financial obligations, Ethan's support, that required investigation. Robert's defense was fatally compromised. To argue against the injunction, he would have to publicly disclose the existence of his hidden son, the very fact he was trying to hide from the legal system and his firm. He chose silence. The accounts were frozen. His plan to empty our assets was dead on arrival. But freezing his assets wasn't enough. I needed my own proof of betrayal, proof that went beyond the bank statements. I needed Ethan. I drove 6 hours to rural Indiana. I found the dilapidated mobile home park and the exact address associated with the bank transfers. The sight of Ethan Hayes' life was gut-wrenching. The poverty was tangible. The rusted trailer, the patched-up windows, the small, struggling garden. This was the life Robert's calculated abandonment had paid for. I found Ethan working in a greasy diner nearby. He was weary, quiet, and carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had Robert's eyes, but his gaze was vacant. I sat down in his section. He approached my table, wiping his hands on a dirty apron. "Can I get you something, ma'am?" "I'm here about Robert Vance," I said, my voice low. I used Robert's full name, the one he kept hidden. Ethan froze. The exhaustion in his eyes was replaced by a sharp, terrible fire. "Who are you?" "I'm his wife, Sarah." "The one he built his perfect, clean life with. The life he bought with the silence of your existence." The conversation was brutal. I told him everything. The quarterly payments, the secrecy, the sophisticated legal measures Robert had taken to ensure Ethan would inherit nothing. I didn't ask for alliance. I offered a cold, hard fact. Your father is planning to divorce me and liquidate his assets. If he succeeds, there will be nothing left for you to claim. You've spent your entire life paying the price for his silence. It's time he paid the price for yours. Ethan was shattered. He wasn't interested in revenge. He was interested in the truth of his father's hatred. Why did he hate me so much? Why couldn't he just acknowledge me? "He didn't hate you," I explained. "He hated the failure you represented. You were the physical, living proof of the past he had successfully erased to build his current reputation." I gave him the address of my attorney, Helen, and a copy of the paternity suit and the joint account freeze order. Helen is now representing the financial interest of the joint estate. Your best legal argument isn't against me. It's against Robert's fraudulent concealment of assets. You are his biological heir. Your claim to the estate is stronger than mine, but only if you move now. I had found my perfect ally, an ally driven by the profound, deep-seated pain of abandonment. My unholy alliance with the son, Robert, abandoned, was the ultimate devastating weapon against the man who had betrayed us both. The war was no longer fought in the kitchen. It was fought in the courtroom, with Robert's past against his future. The delivery of the court summons shattered Robert's composure. He was now facing an existential double threat: my divorce suit, seeking asset freeze, and Ethan Hayes' paternity and arrears claim. Robert's perfect life, his financial transparency, his spotless reputation, was buckling under the weight of his 25-year-old lie. Robert frantically called his lawyer. As I had anticipated, the lawyer's first question was a panicked, accusatory one. "Who is this Ethan Hayes? Why did you not disclose his existence and liability to us sooner?" Robert's secret was now his greatest legal liability, crippling the defense of his assets. My attorney, Helen, executed our strategy flawlessly. This was not merely a divorce. This was a case of spousal financial fraud and attempted asset concealment perpetrated by Robert Vance. Concealing a biological heir was damning evidence that Robert's meticulous financial structuring was designed to defraud both his current wife and his legal biological son. The court immediately mandated a DNA test between Robert and Ethan. When Robert received the order, he looked utterly defeated. He knew he couldn't fight it, and the test would formally strip him of his ability to deny his past. Forever. Prior to the first hearing, Robert's lawyer frantically reached out, offering me a settlement. 50% of the joint assets, a clean separation, and a massive non-disclosure agreement, NDA, contingent on me never mentioning the existence of Ethan Hayes. I did not hesitate. "Tell Robert," I instructed Helen, my voice clear and cold, "that this is no longer about money. It's about integrity. He abandoned his son, and he tried to discard me. I will not sign his NDA. He will pay the full cost of his truth." The DNA test results were presented in court. 99.99% Robert Vance was the biological father of Ethan Hayes. Robert's lie was officially, irrevocably over. Ethan, standing beside my legal team, was not merely a legal tool, he was the living proof of Robert's profound capacity for abandonment. His silent, wounded presence in the courtroom was far more damning than any testimony. His life was the consequence of Robert's cruelty. Leveraging the DNA confirmation and my carefully secured evidence, Helen executed the final legal maneuver. We introduced the old internal memo from Robert's engineering firm, revealing that Robert's successful career was founded on professional dishonesty, a pattern of shifting blame onto others. This completely annihilated Robert's credibility. No judge would trust the man who built his life on such systematic deceit. The judge's ruling was decisive and devastating. Robert's pattern of attempted financial fraud against his spouse was established. Sarah was granted priority claim to the joint marital assets due to Robert's deceitful actions. Ethan Hayes' paternity was legally recognized. Robert was made liable for the full amount of Ethan's retroactively calculated child support arrears and mandatory funding for his education. Robert collapsed in the courtroom, his entire meticulously constructed life, his perfect career, his financial firewall, and the significant fortune he had been planning to hoard, crumbled before his eyes. He was no longer just a betrayer. He was a financially crippled man facing massive debt and the legal burden of a son he desperately wished did not exist. As the court adjourned, I approached Ethan. His eyes held no triumph, only the exhaustion of 2.5 decades of waiting for affirmation. "We won, Ethan," I told him gently. "Your father can no longer deny you." Ethan looked at me, and for the first time a genuine smile touched his lips. "No, Sarah," he replied. "We won." He thought by abandoning us both, he could secure his escape. But his two betrayals only connected us, allowing us to destroy the lie he built together. That alliance was my most profound victory. Robert's attempt to separate us became the very force that united us to bring him down. The ultimate final settlement was now ready to be delivered. Robert was forced to pay the full price of his secrecy. The court's decision was absolute. He was responsible for Ethan's financial history and future, and his deceit had forfeited his right to an equitable division of the marital assets. The negotiation for the final settlement was swift, largely because Robert's position was indefensible. Helen, my attorney, ensured the outcome was not just fair to me, but also finally just to Ethan. The marital home, the beautiful house that symbolized Robert's perfect lie, was sold. The proceeds were divided. The majority went to me, Sarah, compensating for the years of emotional and financial exposure. A significant portion was immediately dedicated to establishing a large, secure trust fund for Ethan, sufficient to cover his accumulated financial damages, complete his college education, and provide a cushion for a future Robert had actively tried to deny him. Robert was left with only the minimum legal allowance and the full, crushing weight of his debt. His carefully constructed fortune, the foundation of his safety and arrogance, was transferred entirely to the two people he had tried to erase. I remember meeting Ethan one last time at Helen's office to sign the final papers establishing his trust. He was wearing a new, clean suit, the first truly professional attire I had ever seen him in, and his eyes, though still holding a trace of past pain, now possessed a quiet determination. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, extending his hand. "You didn't have to do this. You could have just taken your half and walked away." "We were both victims of Robert's arrogance, Ethan," I replied, taking his hand firmly. "He thought he could use us both, me for stability, you for professional protection. His greatest mistake was thinking his money could buy silence. Your inheritance isn't just financial, Ethan. It's the right to claim your history and your name. Don't ever let anyone take that from you again." I made a final, decisive break. I filed for a legal name change. I kept Sarah, but I dropped Vance, adopting my mother's maiden name, Sarah Reed. I severed every legal and personal tie to the man who had been my husband. Robert, stripped of his fortune and reputation, was forced to accept a minor consulting role in a different city. The gossip columnists had a field day, detailing the rise and spectacular, self-inflicted fall of the meticulous Mr. Vance. His life became the mess he had always feared, a consequence of his own lack of integrity. I used my portion of the settlement to buy a small, charming art studio and a quiet apartment near the coast, a place where the air was clean and carried no scent of a hidden past. I went back to my art, painting with a passion I hadn't felt in years. The silence in my new life wasn't the deceptive silence of Robert's control. It was the vast, open silence of genuine freedom. I survived the profound shame of marrying a man who was incapable of truth, and I learned the ultimate chilling lesson. The kindest face often belongs to the most calculating heart. Robert had spent his life building a fortress against his past, but he forgot to secure the foundation, the simple, unyielding truth of his own blood. I want to ask you, the listener, if you discovered your husband was hiding a grown child, would you ally with that child against him? Or would you keep the secret and try to salvage your own life? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to the Story Vault for more true confessions.